Hey guys, what's up? It is S0apy again, back with more revenge stories. If you haven't already, please don't forget to check out my Patreon at patreon.com/S0apyyoutube for exclusive Reddit content. Without any further ado, let's dive right into the stories. And the first one is titled, I've been told you would like to hear about my grandmother. My grandmother got married in 1962 to a young man in the military. For a wedding present, their parents bought them a house in a nice suburb, white picket fence, the whole 9 yards. Not long after they moved in, the next door neighbor planted a mulberry tree on the side of his property near my grandparents' driveway. Nothing seemed amiss, but if you know mulberry trees, you know that crap is about to get real. About 15 years later, the mulberry tree was obnoxious. The birds would come and eat the berries, and any car parked in the driveway would get crapped on, and it would stain the cars and ruin paint jobs. My grandmother, upon realizing the culprit, baked a nice apple pie, walked next door, and asked the neighbor if he would mind trimming back the branches of the tree that hung over her driveway. He told her not to worry, he would get to it soon. 3 days later, my grandmother opened her door to find a half-eaten pie in the plate, crawling with ants, and a note that said, "I changed my mind." My grandmother threw out the pie, cursing up a storm and swearing up and down she would get him to trim that tree or get him back. City ordinance said she could not trim the tree as the roots were on his property, so the whole tree was his property. As the years went by, my grandmother repeatedly asked him ever so nicely to trim it back. His responses were always along the lines of "no" and "F off." Finally, in the mid-90s, my grandmother retired and received a large bonus from her employer for her 35 years of work. She took the money and bought the empty lot on the other side of the neighbor, then went to a nursery and bought 16 mulberry trees, planting them along her property line on both sides of his property. About 3 years ago, he became angry at the damage they were doing to his cars and cut them all back without permission. My grandma took him to court and he was forced to reimburse her for the trees at a markup because they had 10 years to grow. And you know guys, there should be a subreddit or something that is called maybe patient revenge or something, because it seems sometimes the longer you wait, the sweeter the revenge. And the next one is titled, How My Dad Dealt with Student Neighbors Who Parked in Our Yard. This dates back to 1992 when I lived with my parents in a university town. We used to have students live next door and a little downhill from us, and they would continually park their cars inside our property near a dodgy fence between our properties. Their place was full of junk and only had one accessible driveway where one of the longer-term students would always park. Dad was a lawn proud man, and while he was incredibly patient with these guys and would ask them repeatedly to move their cars, he hit breaking point one weekend. There was a big race in town. Half a dozen visiting students guessed crapbox cars ended up in our lawn, and he went around to protest saying it had gone beyond ridiculous, especially in wet weather when it would be likely to damage his lawn all the more. They promised, like they always did, that they would get the cars out and not park there ever again, but hey, the race was on, they all wanted to watch it and have a decent Sunday, and they would leave them there until the race was over. As I mentioned, our backyard was uphill from theirs, and partway through the race it really started bucketing down. Dad did not show any outward anger, but he went into town, came back with a few bottles of dishwashing liquid and coated the whole lawn in the stuff. Come evening, some of the guys needed to move their cars, and when they got to the downhill slope to go out of our driveway, they found they could not steer or brake. 2 made it without much damage, but the third slid sideways, got onto the steeper part of the lawn and went straight through the fence and into one of the other students' cars and pushed it sideways into the house. Total damage: 4 student cars with dents and 1 with busted front suspension, 1 wall of the student rental totaled, a bunch of arrogant students kicked out, and a few skid marks on Dad's lawn. Total cost to my dad? $4 in dishwashing liquid, a few weeks lawn regrowth, and a brand new fence shared with the new neighbors who were pretty decent people. Dad's response to the police asking about the frothy crap on the lawn? White oil kills bugs. And I guess, guys, really satisfying revenge does not have to cost much. And if you have watched until here and enjoy revenge stories, please don't forget to like the video and maybe even post some star emojis in the comments if you want to support the channel. Thank you very much, I really appreciate your help. And the next one is titled, Got everyone fired because they were jerks to me. I worked at a townhome community as a leasing agent for 2 months. The job sucked and I had to work on the weekends, but the manager agreed to let me have Mondays and Tuesdays off. If I didn't get a weekend, I at least wanted Mondays off because they suck. I worked by myself 95% of the time. From the beginning I was barely trained and had no confidence in my job performance. I had no one to call when I had questions either. The assistant manager, Lisa, gave me her login information in case anything I ever did needed a supervisor override. That is how little either managers were around. I was always by myself. When I first started, I went to lunch with another leasing agent, Jessica, who worked at our sister's property. She was nice but talked crap on the company real quick. She told me that the petty cash for her property had been short $50 a few months ago, and Amanda, manager of both properties, had used her own money to force balance it. They both had to sign off on it for audit purposes. Another tidbit, I had to input rent payments into a program on our system. Lisa informed me that she lived in apartment 205, so that would always show up as not paid because it was different since she was living there. She told me just to ignore it and that I never had to worry about her. Labor Day is always on a Monday, so we were closed that day, and when I came to work on Wednesday, the assistant manager Lisa informed me that I would have to start working on Mondays because they were just so busy. I was pissed. I took the job on the condition that I would have Mondays off. I also was told I wouldn't be paid holiday time for Labor Day because it was a Monday and I had that day off. So I was like, thanks for deciding that I have to work Mondays after the Monday holiday. I was pretty open about my annoyance, but whatever, so later on in the day I am checking my personal email and I have an email from the career builder. I still get these emails. I am used to them. I had a profile on there with my resume and just never took it down. Well, Lisa pops up behind me when I am looking at this email and calls and knocks on me to Amanda. Amanda calls and is basically asking me what my problem is and blah blah. She told me Jessica told her that I was negative when we went to lunch that day and I was just trash talking the whole time. Ha! I finally told her I was done with the job and she told me to give her my written 2-week notice. The next day I went to leave the property to go pick up lunch and Lisa waltzes in as I am leaving. She gives me some crappy smirk and when I got back from my lunch she was gone. I got on my computer and my email was all arranged weird. It was arranged by sender instead of by date. I was pissed. I knew that woman had been going through my email, so I remembered that she gave me her login info and I logged into that to see how she liked it. There were several emails exchanged between Lisa and Amanda calling me a brat and a witch and just talking all kinds of crap. I tried to dig up any info about Lisa living in 205, but nothing existed. Everyone else had a folder of info, but there was none for 205. There was not a spare key either. She was living there for free and I knew it. So I decided to email the main guy who worked at corporate. I told him Lisa was living on the property and what her apartment number was. I told him about the petty cash fraud, the going through my email and them never being there, etc. I left my work shirt provided by the company along with my keys and had the maintenance guy sign off on a paper saying I did just that. Then I took a copy and left the property in just my bra and skirt, no F's to give. I turned off my phone and changed the voicemail to the message you get when someone has their phone turned off. These chicks were not exactly brilliant. I got a call from the maintenance guy later that evening telling me that Amanda did try to call me and thinks my phone is off and he had to help Lisa move all of her stuff out of her apartment that day. It was not fast enough because the guy I emailed flew in the next day and cleaned the house. Lisa and Amanda were both fired. And the next one is titled, The Story of Why You Don't F with an Ex-Journalist. This happened back in 2006, but it was such an awesome revenge that I still giggle when I think about it. We used to live in a cul-de-sac, a street with a dead end with very little traffic. Despite this, one guy decided that he was adamantly against anyone parking their car on the side of the road because he felt that it cheapened the look of the street and was going to lower his property values. Yeah, one of those guys. This guy decided that he was going to call a current affair about it. They are a really crappy Australian TV show, putting quote marks because they are so bad, that tends to focus on fad diets, dodgy businesses, bad neighbors and things like that. They stopped my mom as she was leaving to go to work and asked if they could interview her. She agreed but said she wanted to ring our next door neighbor Harold. The bad neighbor lived on the other side of him and Harold hated him. Harold worked locally and quickly drove over so he could be interviewed as well. Now the revenge. Harold was a news anchor for many years and knew how to control the media, knew what to say to turn them against bad neighbor. On camera with bad neighbor smugly standing there watching, he started destroying this guy. Claimed that many of the other residents in the street were afraid to leave the house in case this guy came and berated them. I cannot remember exactly what else was said, but I do remember that part. Mom said that she could see the ACA's people's eyebrows rising as Harold went on. The next night we watched the show to see what would happen. Not only did they have footage of the bad neighbor marching down the street set to the Imperial March from Star Wars, but they would put in all these interviews, which they must have gotten afterwards, from people at the local council saying how this guy had been harassing them for months, and then footage of the guy doing stuff like cutting back someone else's plants because they were hanging over the footpath. Just barely by the way, and therefore a violation, and an interview with him where he said he'd had to ring several other councils because the local one had stopped taking his calls as well as the police. In short, they revealed him to be exactly the crackpot he was instead of doing what he had hoped, which was portraying him as some kind of crusader of justice fighting against the evil neighbors. Bad neighbor ended up complaining to Media Watch about the whole thing, which meant that the episode got aired again and finally moved away because everyone was laughing at him so much. And the last one is titled, For Jebby, the kindest kid I have ever met. I don't know what Jebby's real name was, but that was his nickname. I had known the kid since kindergarten and never was there a sweeter person. He was a kitten, just a cool guy. He would give you his lunch if you didn't have any, he would hug you if you would have a rough day, even if you were a guy. Jebby was a bona fide genius, top of all his classes but kind of slow socially. He liked people, but the kindness made people treat him worse and worse the older he got. We were in various schools together, up through high school, which is where I lost track of him. I was a crap student, smart but did not care about the work. We had gone into one of the most crime-ridden, crappy school systems North Carolina had to offer, and I'd been suspended half a dozen times for various things. Nothing violent or destructive, mostly just insubordination or skipping classes. I didn't care about school, I was past that. Life sucked too hard to care. Jebby, sadly, was the target of every bully in that school. It got really bad the sophomore year when we were in algebra. This algebra class was taught by a teacher who might once have had a soul, but it had been sucked out by years of high school. She cared less than I did. This little guy, we will call him Hunter, who was maybe 140 pounds soaking wet, took to abusing Jebby. Hunter was Latino, which was more of a subculture in our school, less of a racial divide, and a loudmouth little thug. A mean bastard. Just cruel. He would poke Jebby, toss things at him, kicking him after class, call him gay constantly, steal his books and food. Anything like that. Jebby took it all, and he would try to go to the teachers, but the teachers did not give a damn. Like I said, bad school. It came to a head when Hunter tripped Jebby and made him split his head on a desk. Hunter got a week suspension, claiming it was an accident. Jebby got stitches and transferred to another class. When he got back, his favorite target was gone. Hunter decided I was going to be the new one. I by then had little to lose. I was failing every class except theater and English. I was considered a troublemaker by every school admin and was on a first name basis with the school resource officer. The first day he is back, Hunter looks around, spots me reading quietly in the corner and tosses spitballs at me. Childish stuff, but I had seen just much how good going to the teachers did Jebby. I immediately got up from my desk, circled the outside of the room and squared up on Hunter. He got up, but I outweighed him by a good 40 pounds. I knew how it was going to play out though. I went for his head, getting him in a half Nelson. I held it for about 5 seconds and then stepped back. He threw a few crappy haymakers, tapping me on the chin and cheeks. It was like being punched by a fly in trainers. The teacher was shouting, but I let him deck me 5 or 6 times and then shoved him away. He fell over several desks and I retreated to the door, stepping outside. 10 minutes later the school resource cop shows up and I tell him Hunter attacked me. I say I was just going to sharpen my pencil and he stepped up and pushed me. Nobody, and I mean nobody, asked the other students what happened and the teacher hadn't seen the start of it. Hunter of course denied it, but in doing so he pushed the school resource cop who was telling him to sit back down. Now Hunter is in handcuffs and they search him. He had 3 joints, a pocket knife and a pack of cigarettes. Hunter was expelled immediately and charged with assault on a police officer, possession on school property and carrying a concealed weapon, which is a class 1 misdemeanor in Carolina. Since it was his 3rd hit for drugs, that went up to a felony. I got 2 days suspension to add to my long list, but frankly, effin' worth it. Jebby, wherever you are, I wish you all the best, you deserved better. Update: alright, I said I would hunt around and try to find Jebby. My mom, as it turned out, had my old yearbook from high school for my freshman year and I remembered he was really into theater. I found his name and picture in the credits for the school play that year. A bit of Google foo later and I found out he got married, the announcement was still on the web, and moved to California. He owns a little computer repair place and has a kid. He designs those robotic battlebot things, the coolest stuff I have ever seen. I don't know if I have the guts to call him, no way he would remember me, I'm just glad he is alright. And Ripe stars, unfortunately we have already reached the end of today's video. I hope you enjoyed the content. However, if you cannot wait for more Ripe content, then I suggest you head on over to patreon.com/ripeyoutube, where you can find more exclusive Reddit content read by me. Patreon subscriptions start at just $1 per month, and for $1 your name will show up at the end of each of my new videos. However, if you are willing to spend $3 per month, you will get access to more than 50 exclusive Reddit videos, mostly just no mother-in-law stories. However, please understand, I don't want to pressure anyone into spending money, because I am already incredibly grateful that you watch my videos every single day. Thank you so much for your daily support, it really means the world to me, and I hope to see you again tomorrow for the next video.